Alan Quinlan is on the line. I hope you like that Rachel Blackmore reference there, Quinny.
Oh, I do, yeah. What's incredible for Rachel, what she's achieved. It's just phenomenal to think that, and rightly so, she's got justified awards for her success in the last 12 months. It's just been amazing period for her.
What awards did you win in your professional career in terms of like individual awards?
Lord.
Yeah. How long do we have?
No, well, obviously won a few trophies on the field and medals on the field, but very little off the field. When you're in a team game and you've big superstars like O'Gara, O'Connell, O'Driscoll, all these guys, they took the main accolades at the end of the season and for different awards. But no, nearly got Munster Player of the Year in 2008, but
nearly never bulled a cow and all that.
Well, I reckon it was a fix because there was about 3 or 4 Cork people on the judging panel, and Rog looked a little bit guilty. I was nominated, all right, but Rog looked a bit guilty when he won the award. But that was the closest to ever getting an individual award I got.
It's good that you've forgotten about that anyway. When you were younger, actually, before we get to rugby, what were your sporting kind of like choices, would say, when you were a 10 or 11-year-old going into secondary school, then 12 or 13? What were you thinking?
Oh, sporting wise, oh God, I loved all sports. I think I loved the soccer, the GA, rugby. They were kind of the main ones for me. But I suppose it's in your DNA when you're into sport. You'll always take an interest in Irish people. People often ask me my best sporting memory. One probably right up at the top that comes to mind was Ray Houghton's goal against England in Euro 88. I was only a young fella running around. We were doing silage at home in my uncle's farm, and I was supposed to be doing some work, but I snuck off to watch the match, and that one brings back happy memories. And then on News Talk Breakfast for the last couple of years, I've been interviewing Ray. I think it's unbelievable. Loads of big rugby moments as well, of course, but sport is something that, and I always say this to people, is maybe some people are not that into sport, but when the weekend rolls around, I've always looked forward to different sport at the weekend as kind of really part of my life, and then lucky enough to play for a long time at a high level.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Wilson had an article in the Observer yesterday where he's just gone on about the Gulf derby between Man City and Newcastle, and he said basically modern football is a cesspit, but we need it. And it does feel like that at the moment in the rugby context as well. Like, you kind of just want these games to go ahead. Connacht went over. It was a smaller crowd than normal yesterday in Leicester, but it was a really, really gripping game. Obviously, Munster had a win over Castra, which was, I think, as described by Jerry Thornley, more prosaic. But then on the other level, you have the Leinster game called off. What do you make of it all?
Well, I thought Connacht were put themselves in a great position, you know, when you think about, I think they weathered an early storm and
2 tries going into the break then.
Unbelievable. I think probably against the run of play, Jack Carty's try, and he goes half the length of the field, scores 17-12 at half time. Then they get a penalty, 20 points to 12, and you think this is an incredible position for Connacht. And psychologically, that's the key at this level, Johnny. You know, there's going to be an inevitable kind of response from the opposition, and Leicester, they're unbeaten this year. They're very, very powerful. Reminds me of the Leicester of old that I would have played against. You know, really tough place to go, Welford Road. And they've had a tough couple of years. I think Steve Borthwick said that after the match, that a lot of these players are used to losing, which is incredible. But this year they've kind of turned the corner. They brought in some really good young players who have developed through their own system, and they're back to that kind of power, set piece dominance, and that was always going to be the challenge for Connacht. Connacht are a team that, with respect to them, I think they're probably lacking a little bit of power and international quality right across the board. And that's what you find when you're in Europe. You're coming up against a lot of international players. I thought they were really brave. Their response was brilliant. And unfortunately, that bit of power told in the second half. Connacht are a great side to watch, and they create a lot of opportunities. They're absolutely brilliant to watch. And to get a losing bonus point in the end shows that they've gone to another level They didn't capitulate. Finlay Beelam's yellow card, I think, was 57 minutes. They were still leading the game.
That was the beginning of the end, really.
Yeah, it was. The scrum was a huge problem. Line out, the maul, and just some loose kicking kind of cost them, and decision making. And again, you kind of learn as you go along. And I know from my own experience, when they look back at this game, there'll be moments in the game that they didn't control tempo and pace. And sometimes it's very difficult when you're coming up against that power. And, they scored 14 points with the sin binning, and it was coming. You felt it was coming. But for them to claw themselves back and put themselves in a position and to get a losing bonus point could be really, really crucial for them at the end.
Yeah.
And so many positives out of that game for them.
Yeah, I think Andy Friend spoke about that afterwards as well. And I was just looking at the betting before the game. There was a 7-point spread in it. So Leicester were expected to win by 7 points, which was more or less on the button, which is a massive sign of where Connacht have come. And the fact that they'd go away from this game, reflecting on the fact that Friend would say they were probably disappointed, really, because they played some great rugby. Obviously, the second try in particular was class, and Carty, the great game. And they'd probably just reflect on, is it when you're on this journey of progression, sometimes like a game like that against Leicester, you just come up a bit short because you're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and it's international quality. I think it's hard, and that may sound harsh in Connacht, but I suppose if you want to win these big games and probably show them, not just people outside but themselves, a comfort and a control in a game, you need experience, you need power, you need really good decision makers. And I hope I'm not being disrespectful to Connacht, but they're still on a journey and getting better and better and trying to grow and going to that next level where they can kind of compete at the top level. There's some brilliant young players and they are growing and developing. But, on another day, Johnny, they could have won that game. It's kind of hard to stop that power. It's easy to say, well, Finlay Beelam was yellow carded. Even before the yellow card, you just sensed that there would have been an aggressive, powerful reaction from Leicester. And that's the crucial part of the game. If Connacht can withstand that pressure, and I always thought this myself when I was playing, and you learn this with experience. Even when you're going well in games and you're playing, particularly in Europe, there's always going to be a 10-minute period in the game. It could be a couple of 10-minute periods. It depends on tight games where defensively it's actually what wins you the game. What you do when you're under that pressure, how you reload in the tackle, somebody coming up with a big turnover, a steal in a line out, and just the scrum, you just sense it. When the scrum is going bad like that, you just sense the opposition are going to keep going for it. And they did. And so just maybe a bit of power in that front row and depth in their squad cost them yesterday. But, who's to say when Leicester come back to sports ground, they won't fancy that at all. It'll be what they did yesterday was really admirable.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have a full crowd at the sports ground as well. It's a small enough venue as it is, and Connacht I think described as everyone's second favourite team yesterday in the papers. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Sorry, I'm not exactly an exponent of that at the moment. But neither was Nathan, to be fair, and he's supposed to be.
It's actually a good point when I think about it.
Should be here, yeah. I mean, Gillette will probably just sack me on the spot here, but
or they might see you as a project.
Projects. Quinny, on the other hand, is very well shaven this morning. Before we get to Munster, Quinny, Carty's performance and Gavin Duffy saying he's very much at the cusp of the Ireland squad at the very least at the moment after that.
Yeah, again, he's produced a lot of big performances this year, and he seems to be central to when Connacht play well. Jack Carty is either man of the match or very close to being man of the match. So I think he's turned a corner. It was a tough mental period after the World Cup for him when he was left out of the Ireland squad and struggled a little bit at Connacht as well with his form. Would have been hugely disappointed not to be involved in and picked initially in the Ireland squad for the November internationals. But
Gavin's point, I suppose, Quinny, was that he's very, very well suited to the way that they're playing under Farrell at the moment. Would you echo that?
Look, before November, we were kind of questioning how they would play and could they, they did surprise us, Ireland, with the way they played and the accuracy. But if Johnny Sexton is towards the end of his career, and there's been calls for change and who's coming through and all that kind of stuff, but his performance in November against New Zealand was absolutely brilliant, and Japan. So, of course, Jack Carty, an open running game, and I think what he's improved on, Johnny, is his decision making, and he's still prone to being a little bit loose as a fly half at times, which is that natural flair and talent that's his big strength. It's the other parts of the game, controlling the game, kicking game. And it wasn't spot on yesterday, kicking out a hand as a fly half. You want to get up off a maul or a ruck, particularly when you're in the defensive area and your fly half putting you down the field, the ball dribbling into touch, coming up with those big kicks that the crowd kind of love as well. So there's still a little bit to go, but I like what he's doing. Yeah. I think he's a brilliant player, and he would be positive for any side.
And you could see very much playing with a smile on his face. And I don't know, that Irish out half situation, I think it's absolutely compelling ahead of the Six Nations. The two Burns, obviously, Joey Carberry is up in the air at the moment with his injury. But Carty, I think, woke up this morning with a smile on his face. What about Munster, Quinny? They beat Castor. Obviously, they've had a very difficult time of it with with the whole COVID situation. I think they hadn't played in a while going into the game. It wasn't a great performance. Johan van Graan will have to be replaced, obviously, at the end of the season. An awful lot going on there. What did you make the performance initially?
Yeah, I suppose if you didn't know anything about COVID and didn't know anything about the kind of troubles they've had in the last few weeks, and they've been in the headlines for so many things, change of coaches and all the COVID stuff, you think, and you rocked up and watched that match, you'd say it was a dreadful performance. But it's very, very difficult, and there is a kind of a negative spin coming out of the game. The crowd were quiet. There was lots of mistakes. It was frustrating to watch, frustrating for fans to be there. Everyone probably was hoping for a jovial kind of a night, that Munster would get a bonus point win and the crowd would be raucous. But, it didn't happen. And Cass made it very difficult for him. So there's a number of things happening here. I think the emotional turmoil, physical kind of fatigue, all that kind of stuff, lack of match practice, 6-day turnaround. There's loads of excuses there, and there's loads of reasons. They're not even excuses, they're reasons. And I suppose because Johan van Graan, the announcement last week that he's leaving, first of all, then Bath announcing the day after that he signed, people are, some people are not happy about that, particularly the timing of the announcement. And so then you have a performance that's flat, and the first thing people do jump on is, it's not good enough, and it's a negative performance, and the team. I think they tried to play, and I watched back the game a couple of times. They did try to play. Were they good? No, they were very sloppy, and Damien Dialenda said it himself. I was glad he said it, because you don't often hear players saying, look, we should have been a lot better in certain areas, and he did. He said it, and he nailed it in the head. They were trying offloads. They were trying kind of miracle passes. They were pretty sloppy in a lot of their application, and lacking a bit of energy and zip. And, at 19-6 up, you think you'll take that, 77 minutes gone, Cass get up the field, get a couple of penalties, and then they score the try just with a couple of minutes to go, and you think that's a real kind of negative on the night. But if you were to give Munster the 9 points before these two games, you'd have taken them, absolutely. You'd have probably taken them in reverse. The bonus point win, you'd have probably wanted the bonus point win against Cass and 4 points over in Wasps. But I think it's not as negative as people are making out. I think, it's impossible. Some of these guys haven't played 7 or 8 weeks. I know this myself, and I would say to people who are a bit negative, and it's hard when you don't play a game in say 2-3 weeks, you're a little bit rusty. It takes a while to get up and running, but there's a 7 or 8 week period where there's no continuity there. There's no momentum gathered, and they're the reasons. So then you have a Cass side who you see their approach at the end. They kick the ball out and they're delighted with a losing bonus point. They were a really negative side to play, and fair enough, credit to them. But so my overall take on the performance was, look, it was a poor performance, but there's reasons it was a poor performance. I think there definitely needs to be more spark. There's going to be a lot of changes over the Christmas period, and really you probably won't see a full strength Munster. Maybe you'll see one next week, hopefully against Leinster, that they will. But they'll know themselves they got to find a little bit more detail in their performance and be more accurate. It wasn't a good performance at all.
We don't have time this morning to get your views on who or why the new manager might take the job or whatever, but just on Leinster and their frustrations at the weekend and the wider context of what's going to happen with the COVID situation, I guess you can reflect the worry of fans. The limited capacity seems as days disappointing, but at least the game's going ahead. Trouble down the tracks.
Yeah, it's a shame really, but it is what it is. I think people were, obviously. Professional sport is a business as well, and some people may not have any sort of sympathy around that, but from a financial point of view, Munster, it's a big cost on them. They would have had sold out game for the Leinster, corporate hospitality around that, the same for Ulster and Wasps. So there's a number of big games there, and there's people employed within Munster, aside from the players who get well paid. I think there's people who have jobs there and would have been involved in the next few weeks. So it is what it is. It's tough. It's tough on them. It's a difficult period for Leinster as well, and it looks like they're going to try and appeal that decision for EPCR to award Montpellier the 28-point win, and I think they've every right to appeal that. So a lot of uncertainty, Johnny, but let's kind of hope that things calm down a little bit. There's going to be reduced capacities, and it's going to be back to a little bit of that kind of eerie feeling in stadiums. But to have 5,000 people there is better than having no crowds, which we watched and looked at last year. But it's kind of a pity because these Christmas derbies are ones to look forward to, and they ignite the players and different rivalries for different positions, and hopefully we'll have all these games and in the next couple of weeks.
Is there any fear creeping in at all about the Six Nations at the moment?
Of course there's fear. I think it's a good bit away. I think it's the start of February, I think people not being able to go to Six Nations games, and for the Ira few again, and I know they've been in the headlines in the last couple of weeks with the women's situation and their response to that letter and stuff, and it's a lot of negative talk. But
in fairness, that's the Six Nations itself, though, not the women's campaign, but the Six Nations itself. I mean, it must be one of the most eagerly anticipated in many years.
It is. And look, to have crowds back in November at a full house at the Aviva was wonderful, but it's uncertain and nobody knows what's going to happen. It'd be a shame if there wasn't crowds and people allowed go, but it depends what happens obviously in the next couple of weeks. As a player, you just gotta, and I think this is the same in sport right across the board, and particularly in the Premiership. These players now, all these professional players, they've kind of got to go back into their bubbles and make sure that their behaviours they're not going to house parties, they're not going to different gatherings outside of their group, because you infect the squad and it has serious ramifications and financial ramifications for different teams. So as a player now in the next couple of weeks, they've got to kind of reel themselves in and make sure that they're not putting themselves in a position to possibly get COVID and bring it into the squads. But well, Leinster and Munster have both had it now, so maybe that's their dose of it. But let's look. We've got derbies next week. You've got Ulster Connacht, which is it's always a great game, and then Munster Leinster as well. Both of those on Stephen's Day, so at least we can look forward to them.
Thanks a million for your time, Quinny.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.